everyone. On behalf of the Beemer Community Club, thank you for attending tonight's Spirit Talk. This is the 5th time we have held this event, and we hope that you will enjoy learning a little bit about Beemer's history through our two spirits, Clara, Frahm, Cohee, and Albert Toelle. Before we begin our talk, I would first like to give you a brief history of our cemetery. The original part of the cemetery was platted in 1887 with only 91 plots in a square in the middle of the cemetery. The first grave in our cemetery was Minnie Ashburn. Minnie was the daughter of William and Jane Ashburn. William and Jane owned a store in Beemer where they sold liquor and cigars. Minnie passed away as an infant in 1887 and is buried over there. I marked it with flags. So if you would happen to look over there, you may see it. Oh, right through there. The second person in our cemetery who is buried in our cemetery is Charles Fox. His grave is right over here, the broken one. Charles died July 5th, 1887 at the age of 25 due to illness. His grave was right over there. He left behind his young widow who was pregnant with their first child. 12 years after Charles died, his headstone was vandalized in the middle of the night. The police later found 2 mischievous kids guilty and charged them a fine of $54. The 2 kids were reprimanded and released. You can see the headstone with the crack through the middle that was repaired many years ago. So if you walk over there, you'll see it through the middle. The village made the first addition to our cemetery in 1921, followed closely by the second addition and the Catholic addition in 1927. The third edition of our cemetery was platted in 1964. The village is currently undergoing a project to have a cemetery directory. This directory will display a map along with the locations of the graves. Our village clerk, Tracy Mike, has been working on this project for the last 2 years, and she hopes to complete the project in the next few months. Our first spirit this evening is Clara from Cohee, and she will be portrayed by her granddaughter, Marla Brabec.
My name is Clara from Cohee. I was born November 22nd, 1986 around Utan, Nebraska. My parents were John and Katie Frahm. My father, John, was born in Joliet, Illinois, and then moved to Utan. My mother, Katie Siebken, was born in Germany. Both her parents died by the time she was 6 years old, and she was left to live with relatives. My mother then came to Nebraska in 1882 when she was 18. The trip from Germany to America was not easy. The ship's boilers broke and they drifted for 3 weeks before they could be repaired. When the ship returned to Germany, it sank. My mother, Katie, traveled with relatives and was able to meet her 2 older brothers who had come to Nebraska the year before. My parents met in Utan and were married on March 8, 1886. They resided in Utan for 8 years. 2 daughters were born while my father and mother lived in Utan. I was the oldest, and my sister Hattie was born in 1890. In 1894, my parents purchased a 160-acre farm 1 mile north of Beemer. After moving to the Beemer area, John and Katie had 5 more daughters: Laura in 1895, Catherine in 1896, Leona in 1898, Mona in 1900, and Zelda in 1902. I was raised on the farm north of Beemer with my 6 sisters. My parents retired to Beemer in 1921 in the house that was the home of A.D. Beemer, the founder of Beemer. Other families lived north of Beemer, including the Cornelius and Minerva Cohee family. Cornelius was born in Ohio. He served in the Union Army from 1861 until he was mustered out on July 9, 1865. After the war, he lived in Illinois, where he married Minerva Cannon on October 7, 1866. They traveled west to Iowa and then on to what is now Dead Timber near Kroll, Nebraska. It was here that my husband, Jesse Cohee, was born on May 13, 1879. He was the 6th child of Cornelius and Minerva. His other siblings included Alta, Kitty, Hal, Clara, Ray, Albert, Luella, Pearl, and Frank. Ray died in infancy and Albert died at almost 3 years of age. In 1883, the Cohee family purchased 160 acres 3 miles north of Beemer. The large family of 10 lived in a small house before a larger home was built in the 1890s. Cornelius was an orchardist and planted many fruit trees on the land. He even displayed his fine apples at the Beemer State Bank in 1916. My husband Jesse attended the District 19 rural school and helped his father with the farming. At this time, Beemer was a new town with progress happening all around. There were many activities for the young folks. In August of 1901, a group of young people took the bandwagon from Beemer North to the Cornelius Cohee farm, where they were entertained for hours by the Cohee family. Some of those in attendance included Edna Sharp, George Fellman, Harry and Frank Neller, and of course 4 of the Cohee siblings, Luella, Pearl, Frank, and Jesse. Games were played until midnight, and then guests were served ice cream in the dining room. The bandwagon made its way back to Beemer around the 2nd hour of the morning. These activities allowed Jesse and me to meet each other and become more than just neighbors. We had a quiet wedding at my parents' home on January 8th, 1911. The Reverend Antrim of the Beemer Methodist Church officiated. Those attending were my father and mother, John and Katie Frahm, and Jesse's father, Cornelius. Jesse's mother had passed away in 1909, not living to see our wedding day. A reception was given for Jesse and me on January 25th at the Methodist Church. Many of our family and friends were able to attend and wish us well in our newly married lives. Jesse and I lived on a farm just north of Cornelius's farm. We had 4 children, Muriel in 1912, Neil in 1913, John in 1916, and Vernon in 1920. Jesse and I were fortunate to have so many family members who remained in Beemer or the surrounding communities. My parents were also fortunate to live into old age, and I immensely enjoyed having my younger sisters. We often gathered together at each other's homes. We even threw surprise parties for each other to celebrate our birthdays. My younger sisters each made their way in the world, some staying close to others, while others moved away from Beemer. Hattie married Frank Neller, another farm boy from north of Beemer like Jesse. Frank and Hattie farmed north of Beemer on one of his father's farms. Laura married Harvey Long, whose family was one of the first settlers in the area before Beemer was incorporated. Harvey and Laura were also farmers north of Beemer, and their descendants included their grandsons Larry Long and Ken Globius, and granddaughter Debbie Globius, who lived in the Beemer area. Catherine was an operator at the local telephone office, which is now the home of Harold and Beth Roy. Pay was 25 cents per hour. Catherine later moved to California. Leona worked as a clerk at First National Bank in Beemer after graduating from West Point High School in 1916. She matriculated to West Point because Beemer High School did not have a senior class at that time. Leona married Henry Lallman, who was an assistant cashier at Beemer State Bank. They were married in 1923 at the Grace Lutheran Church in West Point, with only her sisters Mona and Catherine as witnesses. Henry and Leona immediately left for Fremont, where they took the train to Denver for their honeymoon. Leona and Henry first lived in Beemer and then moved to California. Mona was also an operator at the telephone company with Leona. Mona was able to graduate from Beemer High School in 1918. Mona married Roy Sulzer on October 30th, 1937. Roy was the undertaker at the Farmers Union mortuary in Beemer. My youngest sister, Zelda, studied to be a nurse at the Lord Lister Hospital in Omaha. She worked as an occupational health nurse for the Union Pacific Railroad. After Zelda retired, she moved to California. Jesse also had several siblings who remained in the Beemer area. Alta, the oldest, married William Galbraith. They farmed north of Beemer. Their great-grandson, Bill Drake, still farms this land. Kitty married Tom Galbraith. Hal became a doctor and set up a practice in Wood Lake, Nebraska. Unfortunately, he died of typhoid fever in 1907, and died at the age of 36. Clara never married and lived with her father, Cornelius, in the house he built in Beemer. After Cornelius died, the land was divided amongst the children. Clara later sold her land to the Neller family and moved to Neely. Luella married Charles Sweethelm and lived on a farm near Bancroft. Pearl also sold her 80 acres to the Neller family after the death of her father. She moved to Neely with Clara and met and married Earl Horton. They lived on a farm near Neely. Frank married Sadie Ayers of Lyons. Sadie was a beloved teacher at Beemer High School. She passed away 3 hours after the birth of her first child in December of 1915. Sadie is buried here in the Beemer Cemetery. Frank remarried in 1923 to Luella Herman of West Point. They bought a farm in Idaho and then retired to Oregon. Jesse and I saw much progress and change to Beemer throughout our lives. In 1938, electricity came to the rural area north of Beemer. We witnessed the change from kerosene lamps to electric lights and refrigeration. In the 1930s, we also switched from horses to tractors. Our daughter Muriel was a nurse and practiced for many years. Neil, John, and Vernon all remained in the area farming and livestock feeding. Jesse and I retired to Beemer in 1945 and lived in a house on Butler Street. Jesse passed away in November 1958 at the age of 79. I passed away in January of 1961 at the age of 74. Jesse and I and our families, the Cohees and the Frahms, were one of the earliest settlers in the Beemer area. We still have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren who live in Cumming County. Beemer was a wonderful place for us, and we are happy to see our legacy continue.
Thank you, Marla. We will now move down to our next spirit, Albert Tell. Our next spirit of the evening is Albert Tell. Albert will be portrayed by his great-great-great-great nephew, Sam Steffensmeier.
My name is Albert Tell. I was born on October 7, 1853, in Watertown, Wisconsin. I was the second child and son of William and Henrietta Tell. My older brother, Carl, was 2 years older than me. My father, William, was born in Germany in 1819. My mother, Henrietta, was also born in Germany in 1825. They married in Portland, Maine on August 10, 1849, and from there traveled to Watertown, Wisconsin. My brother was born shortly after their arrival on February 22, 1850. My mother died when I was 2 years old, so my father gave Carl and me to our grandmother, Magdalena Tell, to be taken care of. In August of 1856, my father married Sophia Werbelow, and Carl and I now had a stepmother. Sophia had only been in America 1 year before marrying my father, and their age difference was 15 years. Sophia was 22 years old and had instantly become a mother of 2 young boys. I quickly gained 3 new siblings: August, born in 1859, Anna, 1861, and William in 1863. During this time, the war between the North and the South was happening in our country. My father enlisted for military service for the Union Army on February 10, 1864, but he died in a hospital in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, due to bloody flux. Carl and I were now orphans. We were 14 and 12 years old. Now begins my story about how I came to the area of Nebraska that would become Beemer. My brother Carl was befriended by the August Lambrick family, who also lived in Watertown, Wisconsin. At the age of 15, Carl traveled to Nebraska with August and Maria Lambrick and their family. Carl and the Lambrick family came to Cumming County, Elkhorn Township, Section 4, on Rock Creek. At this time, there were only about a dozen families in the area. For the first year, they all lived in a dugout. After the first year, a log house was built. August Lambrick then built a combined saw and grist mill on Rock Creek. After spending so much time with the Lambrick family, I'm sure it was no surprise that my brother Carl had his eye on one of the Lambrick daughters. Carl married Augusta Lambrick on December 28, 1869. While my brother Carl had made his way to Nebraska, my stepmother, Sophia, also decided we should go to Nebraska. Sophia had another baby after the death of my father in 1865. He was born near Omaha on the Iowa side of the river. His name was Ernest. A week after Ernest was born, we continued on our way to Cumming County. Soon after the birth of Ernest, my brother William died in that same year. Then a year later, my sister Anna died. Both William and Anna are buried in West Point. Once in Cumming County, Sophia met and married John Shademan on April 10, 1866, in Cumming County. John was a Civil War vet, and he now lived in St. Charles in Cumming County. Sophia soon had more children: Frank, George, and Annie, who were twins. Ernest was adopted by John Shademan. Sophia passed away in 1869 from complications after having the twins. The time is now around 1870, and I am living in a new part of the country with my brother Carl to rely on. Fortunately, we all helped each other, and I met other families who were struggling to be successful, like myself. One family was the John and Emily Schleck family, who had come to Nebraska from Wisconsin, and before that, Germany. One of their daughters was Minnie, and we were fond of each other. Minnie and I married on December 1st, 1876, at the Emmanuel Lutheran Church south of Beemer. We made our home on a farm in Bismarck Township in Cumming County. We went on to have 7 children: Ida in 1877, Anne in 1879, Ernest in 1881, Charles in 1883, Hattie in 1889, Arthur in 1893, and William in 1898. All lived to adulthood except for Arthur, who died at the age of 2, and William, who died in infancy. We farmed our land and attended church at the Emmanuel Lutheran Church. In 1897, Minnie and I moved to Beemer, and we became members of the German Lutheran Church. In 1901, Minnie and I threw a grand party to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. We put up a pavilion and had over 200 guests. The Wisner Cornet Band was there to entertain during the afternoon. In the evening, we cleared away tables for a dance floor, and the Beemer Orchestra provided the music. Minnie and I were the first ones on the dance floor. Our festivities went on until the early morning hours. We felt so blessed to have so many of our friends and family attend. Both of us had come to Beemer with nothing, and it is amazing to see how well we are prospering. In our early married life, Minnie and I were at the bottom of the ladder. Through our hard work, frugal habits, we have accumulated a large number of worldly goods. Minnie and I received many gifts, including a cake dish from Mr. and Mrs. A.D. Beemer, a berry spoon from Mr. and Mrs. Albright, and a water set from my brother Carl and his wife Augusta. Minnie and I were very proud of our children. Our oldest, Ida, married Alfred Mueller on February 2nd, 1894. They lived in Beemer, and Alfred was the mail carrier for Mail Route 2. Anna married William Blummer at the ceremony in our home on June 11, 1902. The Blummer family was very influential, being a very successful farmer. Over 300 people attended the wedding. There was dancing and merrymaking into the night. Ernest married Mary Tebkin on February 11, 1904. They farmed south of Beemer and then moved to Neely. Ernest suffered from anemia and died young in 1917 at the age of 36 after spending much of the last 2 years of his life in Omaha in the hospital. Charles married Martha Rosh on July 6, 1905. Martha was the daughter of John and Sophia Rosh, who at one time owned the Beemer Brick Company. Charles operated a sawmill and later was the district landlord of the WPA. Hattie married Edward Duvall. Edward was a barber in the Duvall barber shop. There were 3 chairs, and you could also drop off your clothes to be cleaned and pressed. Minnie and I were very happy in Beemer. I became a member of the Beemer Garage Company and even bought an automobile. The Beemer Garage was run by G.H. Bogenhan and was located in the west of what is now First Community Bank. The Beemer Garage sold Studebakers and Hupmobile cars. On July 4th, 1910, festivities began in the morning with music from the Beemer Cornet Band. After the music concluded, I was asked by several of the young men to give rides in my automobile. Harry Thompson asked to be taken out of town a few miles to run an errand. After a few blocks, we came upon John Neiman, who asked to join us. We were all having a merry time. We turned the corner at the German Lutheran Church, and the windshield fell down, causing Mr. Neiman to lose his hat to the wind. It was at this time I looked back and lost control of the car, throwing all 3 of us out. Mr. Thompson was thrown clear, but Mr. Neiman and I were thrown under the car. Mr. Neiman was able to free himself, but I was pinned face down under the car. Mr. Thompson went for help and came upon Oliver Philman. They returned and tried to lift the car, but were unable. Mr. Philman then ran to a nearby farm place to use his phone. Help was summoned, and I was taken to Beemer. Medical came from both West Point and Omaha, but my injuries were too severe, and I never regained consciousness. I passed away at 7:30 that evening. My family was devastated, as was the town of Beemer. My obituary read, "He was a kind and indulgent father, a noble friend, and a man whose place can never be filled in this community. All businesses in Beemer were closed for my funeral, and the church was full with people being turned away. The funeral was held at the German Lutheran Church, with the sermon being preached in German and then in English. I was buried here in the Beemer Cemetery, the first fatality victim of a car accident in Cumming County. My poor wife, Minnie, did not do well after my death and suffered from a nervous breakdown. She lived with our daughter, Anna, and her husband, William Blummer, remaining bedfast for the most of the last 3 to 4 years of her life. Minnie died on November 26, 1915, and was buried here next to me. Although both Minnie's life and my life ended early, we were thankful for the life we had in Beemer. We had many friends and family, and we appreciated all of our memories.
Thank you, Sam. Once again, thank you all for coming tonight. A big thank you to Marla and Sam for speaking, and another thank you to the Next Level Media and Promotions for the sound system and the recording of our event. I hope everyone has a good night. Thank you.